Whether you're seeking inspiration, wisdom, or a fresh perspective on leadership and entrepreneurship, the Building Interest podcast has you covered. Together, we uncover the stories behind the successes of groundbreaking leaders, the triumphs, the challenges, and the invaluable lessons they learned along the way. Our discussions go beyond strategic decision-making and delve into the personal hobbies and passions that keep these leaders inspired and grounded in their work. I'm your host, Greg Farber. Let's jump right in. Today, we're joined by the Chief Marketing Officer for Digital Onboarding, a dedicated leader and passionate storyteller, Laurie McLachlan. Welcome, Laurie.
Thank you very much, Greg. I'm happy to be here.
This is exciting. I'm really looking forward to what we're doing here on the podcast this year, really trying to go beyond that. Let's just talk technical stuff and really get into what makes the people that drive businesses, right? And we both work for very forward-thinking entrepreneurial type environments, and it isn't always just the physical business that makes a difference, right? It's the people behind it. And we know that you've been doing something related to marketing for 30 years or so. Obviously, you have a passion for the industry. Is this something that you kind of fell into, something that you always knew you wanted to do? Was some influences along the way that steered you towards where you are today?
I would say that I fell into it. As a child, I definitely loved storytelling. I watched a lot of television when I wasn't playing outside, a lot of 70s commercials, 80s commercials. There were a couple of TV shows, Nothing in Common with Tom Hanks, but, Nothing in Common with Jackie Gleason and Bosom Buddies with Tom Hanks. So I think I just thought it looked fun. And I liked the idea of telling a story to get somebody to kind of get excited about something like a product.
Now, it's funny that you mentioned commercials, right? And I think the average listener or viewer doesn't think of commercials as telling a story, but this gets right to the heart of what we're getting at. You're passionate about marketing and telling stories. Do commercials tell a story? Is that what's happening there?
Well, I think the industry's changed quite a bit. We're talking one day after the Super Bowl. I've already read a lot of the commentary about, how disappointing some people felt those commercials were. But I do think, the origin, and certainly when I joined advertising in the early 90s, was very much about storytelling. I think as it got more data-driven, and more celebrity obsessed, it's changed a little bit.
So marketing isn't necessarily storytelling alone, but that's part of making a connection with the potential customer?
Oh, definitely. In fact, I think it's probably the best way to connect with a customer. You can talk about your features. I mean, we happen to sell a software platform. I can talk about features all day long. But that's never as powerful as if I can tell them a story about what their customer's going through. That's when I get their attention. Absolutely.
It's awesome that we kind of just fell right into that when you said commercials, and it hit me. Oh, okay, we're telling stories to get people interested in our products. So just to back a little bit on that, now we both work in financial services. Obviously, I work for a bank, and you are providing a software platform, as you mentioned, that is important for bank partners. Do you think there's unique challenges in marketing and the positions that you have that relate to banks and financial services that's different from marketing to other industries?
I don't know if it's the circumstances that are unique, but the predicament is definitely unique.
What do you mean by that?
There's lots of commodity businesses out there. I happen to think banking is one of them. Certainly there's neobanks that are, have specialized niches that are maybe a little less commoditized. But if you ask the ordinary American, what's the difference between a checking account at Bank of America and Chase, you're not going to get an answer. And financial institutions seem to always fall back on rates, mobile banking features and functions and branches. I think they assume, I don't know this, but I think bankers might assume that because it's dollars and cents, it's numbers, it's science. But actually, I can't think of a more emotional industry than banking. It's people's livelihoods. And so I think they want to hear those stories, like you got their back, like credit unions are trying to do.
So even though on the face of it, it's a business of dollars and cents, and let's compare, let's say you were, I don't know, a soft drink manufacturer or something, right? It's dollars and cents there too, because you have a bottom line and you want to make money. But how you're marketing, I'm almost hearing you say there's a different level of trust required in getting the client through the door, because that personal connection, that livelihood that you mentioned. So marketing to your soft drink client customer base is different than marketing to the bank base, but it sounds like in a way at its core, you're saying it's really maybe not that different because you're ultimately still going for the same goal.
I think the approach you use would obviously be different, but this might sound bold, but plenty of other people have said it. All marketing, any ad campaign, if you boil it all down, it's promising love and security, period. So you want that fancy car. Why do you want it? To look good, to make friends, to get the girl. You can peel everything back to what like basic human desires. And I think in banking, people just want to know, yes, that their money's safe and secure, but that they're not going to run out of it and that their bank has their back.
Gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense. Pivoting to you a little bit then, you're obviously in a leadership role, chief marketing officer for a company that is putting together these platforms for banks. Are there particular lessons or maybe even a kind of a pivotal moment that happened as you went along that really influenced your approach to not specifically the marketing, right? But your role as a leader guiding the marketing forward in your role?
Definitely. It wasn't a single moment, but I would say it was my most recent several years of working where I had to change. I learned, I guess, the obvious, that the people around you can absorb your stress, and really what they need is they need a leader that projects confidence and care even when things are stressful. And I knew that, and I think I've always done it, but I think I became more acutely aware of it in this kind of growing startup business. And if you ask me where it started, it's maybe sounds like an unlikely place, but it was watching my sister become a mom.
Oh.
I'm not a mother myself, and I don't even know that I knew it was seeping into me at the time. But little lines she'd use with her kids. It's okay to be mad. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be scared. And just like the way she taught them to have a calm and encouraging inner voice, I started saying those things to myself. And I think it changed my outlook. It sounds ridiculous, but it did. Yeah.
I'll be honest, it doesn't sound ridiculous at all. And it's not the first time that we've mentioned children on this podcast as kind of a guiding light for some of us. I have a young daughter, and absolutely, I've had those moments where trying to teach not a thing, but the right way or something has been illuminating in the way that I approach maybe business as well. And I don't want listeners to think, oh, talk to your team members like they're children. That's not the point at all. But the point is the lifting up and the caring, as opposed to just sort of blindly, doggedly going about your business.
Remembering, I mean, psychological safety is the word used, right? In the business world, but people need that at work. They want to feel appreciated, valued, and they might not know that if you don't tell them. That's something I've learned.
And it's such a, how do I say this? Sort of, it's not an active, it's almost like a passive leadership skill. Like you're not sitting them down and telling them, this is how I'm going to lead. You're just doing it by example. And that has so much value.
Absolutely. And just, I mean, it's also how I want to be treated. And, we're not here to talk about our company, but, I'm really proud of the team that we've built. And it really does feel like everyone has each other's back. Yes, we're driving each other and we're excited to win. But I think leaders will find that if you invest in that, instilling psychological safety, people will want to give it their all even more, because it's a place that they want to succeed.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to say that we've seen a similar transformation at our company where, especially once COVID hit and sort of the world shut down. Now, banking is in some ways an in-person business. There's always going to be tellers and physical branches, but in a lot of ways, it's also a back office business. And we expanded hiring to different markets to be able to find a talent that we needed to find. And that meant that paying attention to our culture and the type of people that we brought into our team was paramount to making it work. And I really do agree that, yes, that team behind sort of planning that team and having the right folks in the right places is key for that and supporting them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've certainly done a great job over there.
So I'm going to kind of change gears here just a little bit. Go back to something that we were talking about in advance of today's episode. And you mentioned, I think the words were used, that you like to be a spectator. And so here I am hosting a podcast, and I'm actually much more introverted than you might think. I like to sort of be observing how other people are interacting and things. And being a spectator is something that I value. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on what that means for you and maybe why you think that's something that's important to you. And does stepping back and being a spectator make you better, or is it just something you like to do to kind of calm your brain?
I don't know if it makes me better. And that was my response when you asked what my hobbies were.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So yeah, what I meant was, really my passion is learning about the human condition, right? Why are we here? Why do we do the things we do? And I'm a spectator when it comes to storytelling. I love to go to things like the Moth Story Slam, poetry slams, theater. A lot of the movies I watch they're not horrors. They're not always comedies. They're usually something having to do with like an experience that I've never experienced and trying to learn about people, even though it might be fictional.
Interesting. I love that. I mean, in my day job, I work in audit and compliance, and it's not exactly the most social of jobs, right? I'm not out running a sales team. I'm not, having that sort of that natural engagement where all I want to do is go talk to people to bring in business. And yet sitting back has really given me an opportunity to kind of have that perspective that when it's time to come forward, I'm better prepared.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm probably more thoughtful about it. I can definitely, in fact, I was in a room for 5 days last week with a big group of people, but I'm much more comfortable one-on-one or things like that.
So another sort of funny little thing that we came across when we were preparing for today's episode, found a quote of yours online, and I'm guessing there's more to the story than the quote. I love the quote as it stands, but I'm wondering if you can kind of maybe put it in context for us. What you said is, the truth is, if the sales team would stop winning so many deals and the overachieving product and engineering teams would take some extended vacation, I could finally shine. Now, what did you mean by that? And what's the background? And is there some truth to that perspective?
Well, let me tell you a quick story. So this was, I think it was last spring. Things were roaring at the business, and I got behind on issuing new business press releases, right, where we talk about the banks and credit unions we're now working with. And my head of sales, John, rightfully called me on it. He's like, where are the press releases? And I felt so guilty. And I was like, I know. And I thought to myself, well, I can either write dozens of these right now, or I can write one press release. And that's what I decided. And then I thought, I think I was slap happy. I'm like, how can I make this fun and worth reading? And so I sort of told the truth, which is I fell way behind on writing press releases, and that was the headline of the story. I grossly misunderreported our wins.
Because things were going so well. You're not falling behind because it's tough. You're falling behind because
Right.
things are great.
So that's how to do marketing, right? Or I think it's also what makes, I know this is a different topic, what makes a good roast, right? An insult, it's a compliment disguised as an insult, right? Like, I don't know. He's so smart, he could never, it's so, yeah, I was just trying to have fun with it. I was trying to really tell the truth, which is, the business is doing well, which is the message you'd want to get across in the press release, but use myself as the fall guy to get a laugh.
Somewhere between humility and self-deprecation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's my kind of humor.
No, I really love that. And I experienced a similar moment at the bank. I don't know, it was at least 10 years ago. And I just thought it was always so funny because in a vacuum, a quote like that is absolutely right. Sometimes you just need a moment to reset so that you can shine. But those moments don't happen unless things are going well. And there's a reason that there's so much going on all at once, which is ultimately a good thing in our environment, right? How does that play into marketing strategies? Again, where connecting isn't necessarily numbers and data, right? We talked before, banking is presumably numbers and data. A lot of marketing goes back to numbers and data because you want to make the profit and so forth. But where really the connection is driving you rather than the numbers and the data.
Mm-hmm. So I can tell you a couple stories. The first thing I want to say is we're a business to business company. So we're selling our product to businesses as opposed to just everyday people. I think this comes into play with a sales process like that, right? A buyer is going to tell you they need to solve a particular problem, that they have a certain budget, that they're looking for technology. What they might not tell you is this is their big career move that they think is going to make them famous. Or they might not tell you that their boss is breathing down their neck and they're scared of losing their job and they want you to make them a hero. Like there's all kinds of reasons that people buy products and services, and you need to understand people and what motivates them. But in my own marketing, we were in a situation, this is maybe a year and a half ago, where, I know that everyone on the line isn't into banking, so I'll be quick. We're going to a conference where everyone was talking about like the most cutting edge AI, 30 years out technology transformation. And I think we had a really powerful story to tell. And so I didn't want to compete with that. And so I wrote a speech that our CEO gave in numerous locations that was all about the average Joe. And so it was a story that we told to help them empathize with the person that's probably in their branch right now while you're sitting in this conference and going through the pain of using your product. So, don't get distracted about things that are 30 years out if, in fact, Joe is in your branch right now, ready to walk out. And so just being able to make things real, we got a lot of nods. We got a lot of people that remembered that speech. We could have just gotten up and pitched the product. But if you tell a story, people remember stories.
Your expertise, you mentioned with sort of the human psyche and everything that we do, are you tailoring how you then move forward in your role based on that information?
We definitely try very hard to do that. But it's something we never stop talking about. We're constantly talking about, we call it discovery information. But, how do you really learn? Like the question that I want answered as a marketer is what made that light bulb go off today? Why did they call me today? Like that's my starting point. And then you just follow that with about 100 why questions to get to the real why. But that kind of insight is gold for me. I don't know if you're familiar, you probably are, with Bob Moesta, who's kind of the author of the Jobs to Be Done framework. But I don't know him and he doesn't know me, but I've read his stuff. And I mean, he taught me a lot about how to ask questions, and I'm still not good at it, but I'm trying.
Do you have any advice on how to ask questions?
Well, number one, and like any good researcher, never assume and never lead the witness, ever. So you never want to suggest an answer, give them multiple choice. You want to be calm and give off the impression that any answer is okay. You want to ensure that they know that the reason you're grilling them is because you want to give them the best solution, help, or advice. And never stop at the first why question.
So be transparent in your motivation as you keep asking.
Yeah. So, for example, you could ask somebody, well, why did you buy this car today? And they'd say, well, my old one broke down. Really,
Fair
what you
enough.
want to know, why did they buy this car today?
Right.
And so you're just going to keep getting to why, and it's probably always going to lead to an answer that's emotional. Why they picked that car. It's probably not, the cubic inch space or the engine, or maybe it is, but I do think you need to keep getting to why to either get to the surprising answer or something emotional that's going to help you. And in the best of cases, it's a shocking answer. Like, oh my gosh, we were assuming this was the problem. And that's the kind of insight you can get if you're patient enough.
But shocking in a good way, because it lets you then solve their need better rather than shocking in I don't know what to do with this way.
The biggest mistake that any innovator or any entrepreneur can make is to focus on solving the wrong problem. Putting all of your money and all your resources, and then you realize you were wrong. Yeah.
So that's actually a good segue back to the other question I wanted to ask you from when you mentioned with the conference and the speech, and you mentioned sort of the average Joe who's in the branch right now and he has a problem that needs to be solved. But how do you blend that with innovation? Because we also can't stay stagnant, right? We do need to think about maybe AI 30 years from now is terrifying. I don't want to think about that either. But you do have to think about innovation alongside average Joe in the present, right? How do you blend those?
I think about the future all the time as a hobby. I started a future stuff Slack channel at work. I think the reason I mentioned that and the reason that we wrote the story the way we did is because it can get frustrating if you're in this banking industry for a long time to realize the innovations we were talking about 15 years ago, we're still talking about now, and things just don't move that quickly. And I absolutely love talking about how AI might change the future of interactions. I just think it's really important not to get too dazzled that you forget to kind of take care of things that you can fix right now that would make a huge difference.
Hey, video famously killed the radio star, and the radio is still going, right?
Well, that's something else that's funny being in marketing is people are always talking about the death of a channel, right? I'm like, podcasts just brought talk radio back. That's all they did. Like I love talk radio. We just call it a podcast.
Right. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So maybe the method changes, but really that connection that people are looking for, whether it's audio or visual or some other, that connection still remains.
Yeah, I think it's going to get pretty interesting in the future. I think we're going to be in the movie or feel like we're in the movie.
Kind of already feels that way sometimes.
Yeah, it kind of does.
Now, do you feel that those connections spill over into the hobbies that you mentioned, whether it's a story or a poetry slam or something, you go to see a performer? Is there a connection there? And not necessarily you inviting yourself backstage and having a personal connection, but is there a connection even just within being the spectator? Is that part of what's driving you to these types of events or hobbies?
Oh, definitely. I think if you're in the room with a storyteller and a big audience and it's different than watching a movie. And I should say all their stories are autobiographical. So you're also learning about the person. These are all real stories.
Which again is a connection, even if you're just reading it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the same thing that I get there. I also am a little obsessed with reading psychology articles, listening to all the psychology podcasts. I think it really is just trying to understand why people do what they do, why they need to hear things in a certain way. And it's really just, I think, probably trying to, it captures my personal interest, but work-wise, you know, just ensuring that what we're putting out there is being received as it was intended. You know, I like to say a lot of the world's problems happens between here and your ears, and that translation that happens. And if we can just figure that out. And so that's what I'm always trying to figure out. How do I say this in a way so that you hear what I mean?
And in a professional sense, so that it resonates with the majority of, or even perhaps more than a majority of the folks you're either working with or your target audience in a marketing environment or something like that.
Absolutely. You know, I am obsessed with, you know, I'm always convinced there's a better headline or a better way to pitch it, and just trying to refine that story, which I've done for 6 years. I've probably rewritten that story a million times. It's a fun thing to do, and I think it's important.
So I want to go to a segment now. We're going to do kind of what would you choose? And this can be a little bit rapid fire if you'd like, but if you have some sort of elaboration on your answers, we'd love to hear your thought process. You said earlier, make sure that people always know there's no wrong answer. There is no right way to choose. Any answer is okay. What does Laurie prefer? Reading a book or listening to a podcast?
Listening to a podcast.
And any comment on why you prefer that?
Probably the same reason I love being read to or stored. I don't know. I read a lot of articles, but I would much rather listen to a book, particularly if the author is the one reading it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
See, I've gotten a lot more into podcasts lately. It's part of sort of, I guess, research for doing my own work. But historically, I've always been more about the reader because I feel less likely to be distracted if my eyes are following it versus if I'm listening to it and then I see something distracting. It's easier for me to oh, what did they just say? And I have to rewind a little bit. But
yeah, that's a fair point.
How about this one? Do you prefer having a routine or spontaneity?
I prefer spontaneity. My weekdays are highly routinized. Sometimes I feel like I do the same thing in the same order. You know, I mean, I think we all do if we're working, but I definitely prefer spontaneity. I like to say, even if I had plans to, I don't know, go to Paris next week, I'd probably resent that I had plans.
Well, then you could always change your mind last minute and go to Hong Kong instead.
Yeah.
A little more on the professional side, perhaps. What do you value more, design or data? And this goes back to what we said before, right? I think I know where you're going to go with this.
That's a mean question.
Hey, there's no right answer.
Well, who is it?
Be spontaneous.
Design. I mean, if it's a personal choice, design, absolutely. Edward Tufte, I don't know if you know him. He wrote many books, including Information is Beautiful, and he turned data into art. I thought that was pretty clever.
That is a good way to blend the two answers in this or that, right? Yep. I kind of thought you might lean that way because of the connections versus dollars.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's another one that sounds easy at first glance, but might give you a moment to think about. Finding inspiration or inspiring others?
That's such a hard one. It's like, do I want to be selfish or giving? Both.
Both are important, right?
I would say, first of all, they're both important. Of course, I'm not going to lie. Like if I stumble on something that's just like crazy interesting, whether it's in science or math or outer space or marketing, I get really excited about that. And yes, I like inspiring others, but there's something that happens when you're the discoverer of something new or beautiful.
No, and that's great. I mean, honestly, I feel like there's kind of this old mantra that if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of others. And logically, it's the same reason you're supposed to put your own safety equipment on before you help other people, like they tell you in the plane with the little opening speech about safety procedures and everything, right? And it seems, like you said, selfish on the face of it. But if you're in a better place, then you're better able to help others. I like your answer.
Thanks. I feel less selfish.
Okay, last one. We talked a lot about what makes you tick and what you're passionate about and so forth. Is that passion the most important thing, or is it the purpose behind what you're doing?
It's the passion. So I love our company. I love our product. I love our team. I say that all day long online. But I also say I could probably get just as passionate marketing a paper towel holder. Like I would find a way to get passionate about it. Let's just say that.
So you being passionate is more important than the product behind it is what you're seeing as the purpose.
I don't want people to interpret that I don't think purpose is important, but I think as a marketer in particular, and maybe for anyone that's working, if you've got to work and you got to sell something, you may as well fall in love with the product, find ways to get excited about it and be passionate about it. And unless you have that, maybe blinded belief and drive, it's kind of hard to do my best, I should say. I don't want to speak for others, but I really have to get myself fired up.
Absolutely. And I don't think anyone's going to think that that means you don't like the product. But yes, being excited about what you're doing probably makes you better at meeting the purpose.
Yeah, I think if you can do that, you can have more fun at work.
So we'll kind of move on with your passion here. We're going to talk a little bit and we're going to ask you to bring some inspiration. So for bringing inspiration, this is a segment we're introducing where when we talked before the show, we asked you to think about something that inspires you and share with us here on the episode today, something that brings you inspiration. And we just learned from you that finding inspiration is important, right? So let's dig into Laurie's personal inspirations. What did you choose to share with us today, and what's important about it? Why did you bring it?
Okay. I brought a podcast. I guess it's backwards, but it says The Hidden Brain.
Yep, I can see it. Hidden Brain.
Okay. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but this is one of the many psychology podcasts that I love. This one's done in a storytelling format. The reason I brought it is because it's very accessible, and I just think it's really important to understand ourselves, why we make decisions, why others make decisions, so we can be more understanding of each other. And I don't know, every episode is entirely fascinating. So,
and you say it's accessible, so it's not highly technical jargon. You don't have to have an advanced degree to listen. You can just throw this on your drive home, listen to it, and get some insights into how people think.
You can. And I mean, I would also throw in even the American Psychological Association has a podcast, and theirs is very accessible. So, but yeah, Hidden Brain's more entertaining. I recommend that one.
I love it. This is the kind of thing that I think sort of transcends, and we started in the opening by saying this, transcends banking. Yes, we're a bank and we are hosting a podcast because we're a bank, but we're not trying to have it be about checking accounts and savings accounts. And this whole conversation you and I have been having here today, those connections, and you said it best just a second ago, understand why other people make decisions, right? That can be so frustrating. Somebody makes a decision that you don't like, but maybe if you understand why they made that decision, you might like it more. You might realize, oh, there's a reason to this decision. This is going to work out better in the long run because I now understand what the person was thinking, what their goal was, what their purpose was in moving the conversation this way. So I think that's really neat. Do you have any other thoughts or words of wisdom for our listeners and our viewers before we wrap up here?
No, just no matter what business you're in, you're probably dealing with people, you're probably selling something to someone, and, don't underestimate the power of storytelling and human connection. Sure, you got to sell your features and your products, but I do think it's a recipe for success if you can combine both.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully everyone has enjoyed the story we've told here today. See, we did some storytelling, right? And I want to thank you so much for coming on today, Laurie. This has been an absolute blast. I always look forward to these episodes. I never know exactly how they're going to go or what we're going to cover. And I had a great time today, learned a lot, and a lot of ideas to take back with and just kind of think about how do we interact and what do we do that make our connections stronger. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
All opinions expressed by Laurie McLachlan are her own and not the opinions of Leader Bank NA. Leader Bank is not affiliated with the Hidden Brain podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and rate our show. The Building Interest podcast is available on all podcast platforms as well as YouTube and TikTok. We want to hear what you think of each episode and encourage you to submit any questions that you want us to cover, so please find us on our YouTube or TikTok channels and comment your thoughts. I'm your host, Greg Farber. My thanks to our fabulous production team, Sydney Clapp and Ryan McNulty, and until next time. For more information on today's subject, visit leaderbank.com. In addition to past episodes, you can also find our corresponding blog entries for more insights. This podcast is a production of Leader Bank, an equal housing lender, member FDIC, NMLS number 449250.